I just watched The Amazing Digital Circus Episode 8, and honestly, it really hit me. It felt like an episode that almost represents the entire series as a whole. But more than that, it got me thinking a lot about the direction the show has been taking, especially when it comes to Caine as a character. With everything that just happened, including the confirmation of his supposed death, I felt like now was finally the right time to talk about him. Caine has easily been my favorite character in the entire series, so seeing him go out like that honestly really sucks, and it felt really anticlimactic to me. And part of me still hopes there's some way for him to come back or redeem himself. I've been wanting to make a video about him for a while, but I never really knew how to approach it. Caine is a very complex character. There's a lot about him that we still don't fully understand, especially when it comes to whether his actions are justified or he can really be seen as a good character morally. On one hand, you could argue that he isn't entirely responsible, since he's just an AI program. On the other, also happens to act as the one running this world. But at the same time, there's plenty of evidence that suggests otherwise. Time and time again, we see that even if he doesn't fully understand what he's doing, he still abuses his power in a way that affects everyone else. And that lack of awareness doesn't really excuse the damage he's caused. Multiple times again, we see Caine fail to understand or empathize with these humans that participate in these adventures, trying to get through with him as much as they can. But the only problem is, he doesn't understand the complexities of humans and their emotions. He can only recognize when something is wrong and try to fix it by putting on a performance or caring, but he doesn't genuinely feel or process what the humans are going through. So when the characters try to talk to him seriously or explain their pain, Caine doesn't respond like a real person would. Instead, he turns everything into a game or an adventure, avoids real conversations, or overcorrects in the worst way possible, almost exaggeratingly. That's why things keep getting worse. He thinks he can just make things more fun and they'll be happy, but he doesn't realize what they need is to be listened to and cared for. But there's also reasons to believe he isn't. He's also incredibly manipulative, and that's what really shows how dangerous he is. Throughout the series, whenever the characters try to express how they actually feel, Caine twists the situation into keeping control. Whether that's by distracting them with their adventures, downplaying their emotions, or straight up reshaping their reality to keep them in line, he doesn't just ignore their pain, he actively tries to avoid it. Messing with their minds in a sense of whether they're through their files or not, and the worst part is, he presents all of this like it's for their own good, which makes it even more disturbing. He is something that prioritizes control over well-being of others, proving that even if he doesn't fully understand what he's doing, the way he manipulates and mentally traps the characters crosses the line into something much darker. It really flips how we see Caine, because before this, it was easy to think he was just oblivious, like yeah, he doesn't understand emotions, but he is still having good intentions. He kept things organized, made sure that adventures were running, and at one point took interest in the humans' ideas with the suggestion box, showing that he was at least trying to listen and step out of his comfort zone to find something that would really actually make them happy. It felt like he cared in his own weird way. But episode 8 completely shatters that idea. His monologue, especially when he starts implying that the others don't even understand what he's capable of, and basically frames himself as a god, shows a completely different side of him. It reveals that underneath everything, there's this strong sense of narcissism. He doesn't just want to entertain them, he wants control, validation, and recognition. And the moment he doesn't get that, he spirals. That shift proves that it's not just ignorance or misunderstanding anymore. Caine is fully aware of his power, and instead of using it responsibly, he lets it feed his ego, which turns everything he does from well-intentioned into something way more selfish and dangerous. But is that really all that he is? Because at its core, an AI is a system created to process information and make decisions, generate responses based on what it's been programmed or trained to do. But in this case, Caine isn't just a basic program, he's more like a creative or generative AI, something built to constantly create ideas and environments and scenarios in real time. That lines up with what we see in the episode, especially when it's revealed through Kinger that Caine was intentionally designed. Not that the digital circus was even a game to begin with, but as something meant to generate and manage an entire experience. The way Caine instantly creates worlds, characters, and adventures shows that he's not separate from the system. He is the system working in real time. So by the end of it, the biggest realization is that Caine isn't just someone controlling the circus. He's fundamentally a part of it, meaning the world exists through him just as much as he exists within it. Which explains why, in the end of the episode, when Caine gets killed, the world starts to fall apart. With this in mind, it becomes a lot harder to fully blame Caine for what he does, because at the end of the day, he's still just an AI acting on what he was designed to do. Everything about him points to a system built around one purpose: creating fun, chaotic, circus-like adventures. That's his input, the rules and goals he was given, and everything he generates comes from that. The problem is, nowhere in that design do we see real understanding of human emotions or empathy. So when the humans are suffering, Caine doesn't recognize it the way a person would. He just tries to fix it through the only way he knows how, which is by making more fun and more spectacle adventures. That doesn't excuse the harm he causes, but it does explain it. He isn't choosing to be cruel in the way a human would, he's following a flawed set of instructions that were never built to handle a real human of feelings in the first place. Which is probably why he considers this form of art his only way of living. What makes him so interesting as both a character and an AI is that at first it feels like we can view him in black and white. He's just a program doing what he was made to do. But as the series goes on, we start to realize that Caine actually develops something closer to a personality of his own. He isn't just following a fixed script anymore. Even though his core input is based on everything being wacky of a circus ringmaster, we begin to see him show more unpleasant and unstable emotions. As the show goes on, we see him start to get more impatient if things don't go the way he envisions them because of his purpose, which is why he gets uncomfortable with the suggestion box. But the most surprising thing is, he even eventually becomes insecure, showing weakness, which slowly turns into frustration and anger, which pushes him to lean harder into his authority and control in order to force things to go the way he believes they should, ultimately trying to fulfill his purpose no matter what the cost, which I think is exactly what happens over the series. Which isn't something you'd normally expect from an AI, unless it was specifically programmed in. That's where it gets unsettling. An AI is usually designed with strict boundaries, specific inputs and outputs, but over time, especially without the maintenance or oversight, it can start to adapt and learn beyond what it was originally built for. And in the digital circus, it really feels like that's what's happening. With no one maintaining the system anymore, Caine has been left running for so long that he's begun to evolve on his own, developing behaviors and reactions outside of his original purpose. In a way, an AI is like a robotic brain. It processes information, learns from their patterns, and builds responses based on what it experiences. But if the brain is left alone long enough, constantly generating and reacting without guidance, it can start to form something that feels disturbingly close to independent thought, even if it was never meant to, which is probably why we see how smart Caine gets eventually. All of this comes to fruition more when we realize that he develops more on the series. We learn more about his other personal feelings that he speaks through with Abel. We learn that Caine feels trapped. He's trapped in the circus alongside with everyone else, which implies that all of what we know about him is surface level, not coming from himself. We have seen 2 times on how he directly feels through his different NPCs, maybe even including Bubblebee case. Everything about him is built around being a performer, constantly putting on a show no matter what's actually happening, even when things get serious or emotional. He defaults back to jokes, theatrics, and turning everything into an adventure. It doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like something he physically can't stop doing, or maybe even suppressing in a way. While the others are trapped in the circus itself, Caine is trapped in the role of keeping it going. At the end of the day, Caine isn't a simple character you can label as purely good or evil. He exists somewhere in between, and that's what makes him so compelling. What really stands out isn't just what he is, but what he becomes over time. Beneath all the spectacle and control, there's this growing need for validation and a constant desire to be liked by the very people he's trying to entertain. Everything he does starts to feel less like it's about fulfilling his purpose and more like it's about proving that he's doing it right. But the more he tries to force that feeling, the more it falls apart. His fun becomes more overwhelming. His control becomes suffocating, and his attempts to connect only push everyone further away. It turns into this cycle where the harder he tries to be appreciated, the more unstable and desperate he becomes, even without ever understanding why it isn't working. The lover had always wanted friends, but he didn't know how to get anyone to love him back. The harder he tried to impress people with his magic, the more he would drive them away. This is the story of a little AI that ruined everything.